All right, guys. So I'm here to talk about the basics of lifting. I will go ahead and talk about a little bit of the history behind it, and then we'll talk about some basic principles and safety. And then I will, of course, the main subject matter will be form and technique. We'll also learn about proper breathing, and as well as I'll go over some stretches and stuff at the end. A little bit of history behind lifting. So it goes back to the beginning of recorded history. There's writings, there's sculptures dating back to ancient Greek and also ancient Chinese times. There's a story of Milo carrying a newborn calf until it was fully grown. You guys may have heard of that. There's actually a picture right there on the slide. And so basically carried it till he was, and since he was a little calf until he was a big bull, and he got strong along while he was doing it. Weights were generally stones back in the day, and as you can see, there's actually a picture right there of that rock-looking thing with the little hole in it that looks like a handle. That actually was the original type of weight used. They would just carve out holes into these rocks and use them as they were pretty much the precursor to kettlebells, which I'll be using different types of equipment just to demonstrate today, and that will be one of the pieces of equipment. So, basic principles of lifting. So you're basically training to increase either muscle size, strength, or endurance by manipulating repetitions, sets of repetitions, tempo, which is how long you stay in that movement. So you can do a squat really fast, or you can do it really slow. That's what tempo means. You can also manipulate different movements. So I'll go through all sorts of different types of movements today, everything from squats to deadlifts. And then also you can manipulate weight or resistance. So like I said before, the goal is to increase muscle strength, the size of your muscles, and also muscular endurance. Different types of equipment you can use. Barbells, which this is gonna be my pretend barbell today. So barbell, you can think of it as a long bar. Dumbbells, which are the shorter ones that you can hold single-handedly. Kettlebells, which is a little ball with a little handle on top, and I'll use one of those today. You can use bands, and you can also use weight machines. Today I'll primarily be going over barbell and a little bit of dumbbell work. We won't really talk much about bands or weight machines. And also have a medicine ball. That's another type of strength training equipment you can use. There's also other objects out there. Going back to the ancient times, we still have stones around. The sport of strongman uses primarily odd objects, everything from sandbags to stones to they pull trucks, they do all sorts of crazy stuff. But that's the sport of strongman. But as far as body weight movements, you can also use your own body weight as resistance, for instance, in push-ups or pull-ups. So those are just two basic movements you can do with just your body weight. And that also counts as resistance. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put the slide on first, and then I'm gonna switch the camera to me. That way I can kind of demonstrate and further explain. So I'm gonna go through several movements here, starting with the squat. Okay, camera's back to me. So in the squat, so you're basically demonstrating a sitting down movement. The biggest things here are neutral spine. So what I mean by neutral is your spine is in a neutral position right here. So you can think of it like a straight line. See the PVC pipe is touching down on all corners back here. If you're anything but neutral spine, it would look something like this, or something hyperextended like that. There's too much gap going on right there. You see that? So you want to be nice and neutral right here. That's what I mean by neutral spine. Or you can think of it in another way, like you can think of it like a string pulling up at the tip of your head, constantly trying to pull you up into the sky. That also kind of automatically puts you into a neutral spine position. So let's start with neutral spine. You're going to be about feet shoulder width apart, maybe just a touch bit wider to perform a squat. You want knees out and depth. Okay, so let's start with knees out and then depth right there. So ideally you want to be hip crease below parallel, knees go out the same direction as the toes, knees go out. Don't necessarily worry about knees going over the toes. That's perfectly fine as long as you're rooted in the heels. Heels should stay flat on the floor. They should be pressing through the floor. So you don't want heels to come up. You want heels to stay down, okay? All right, so I'm gonna kind of go through that again. Let's check our stance here. Neutral spine, knees go out, depth. I like to put my hands out for kind of a counterbalance right there, okay? And then you finish by just standing up tall at the very end of the movement, okay? I'll go through a couple more reps here. Okay, so that's an air squat. Since we are talking about lifting, there's different ways to add resistance to this movement, starting with a back squat. So with this one, back squat gets its name because you put the barbell across your back. This one, same thing goes. Stance, feet shoulder width apart, knees out, heels down, and then depth. Okay, so that's the back squat. Right there, see how my heels stay flat on the floor, knees go out. Okay, so a common fault that you'll see in that movement, knees go in. That's a common fault that you'll see. You don't want that to happen. And also heels come off. You also don't want that to happen. Okay, so you want to make sure those heels stay down and those knees go out. Okay, depending on how often you do this, you might not be able to get to full depth, but it's something that you can work on over time. Okay, next movement. So we talked about the squat. So some performance cues here: maintain neutral spine, weight in heels, depth. I didn't talk about the straight bar path, but I'll touch on that again here in a second. And then knees out. Oops. Okay, the next movement we'll talk about is the front squat. So there's some cues right there. Basically, the setup is the most important part of the front squat. You can see in the depiction here, the first guy, elbows are high, bars placed across the front. Okay, neutral spine, again, like we talked about before. You want that spine to be nice and straight. Again, with any squat, you always want heels on the ground, weight on the heels. Depth, straight bar path, and knees out. Okay. Okay, camera's back on me. So with the front squat, what I mean by the straight line path is basically performed the same way as the squat before, but now I want to kind of talk about the straight line path. So elbows high, bars placed across the shoulders here. Probably the most important piece is those elbows here. Okay, so notice as I descend, you want that bar to stay in as straight line as possible, going up and down. So that's what I mean by straight line path. Anytime you're doing any type of lift, you want that object to move in a straight line as possible, okay? So any fault in that movement will look like heels coming off the ground, okay? See how that makes it so you go forward. That's a no-go. You don't want that to happen. Scoot back a little bit. Another fault you'll see, elbows drop. Okay, that's also a no-go. You want those elbows to stay nice and high. That's where the bar is going to be stabilized across the shoulders, okay? So keep those elbows high as you go into the squat, and then you stand up. That bar goes in a straight line. Again, heels stay flat. Stand up straight at the top. Okay? So that's the front squat. And again, knees are always out. Okay. Next movement we want to talk about. Now we're going to get into the most advanced version of the movement, which is the overhead squat. So once you build the foundation for this squat movement, you'll find it not easier, but you can add layers of complexity to the movement. So we started with the basic front squat, or we started with the basic back squat, we went to the front squat, now we're talking about the overhead squat. Just different ways to place the resistance. The overhead squat, where it gets its name, the resistance is going to be over your head. So that proper positioning overhead is the most important piece. And then just like we talked about with the other squats, neutral spine, weight and heels, depth, straight line path, and knees out. Those things will never change. Those are fundamental, any squat that you do. So camera's back on me. I'll go ahead and perform this movement. So for the overhead squat, like I mentioned before, the overhead position is the most important piece. So you will be, shoulders are up and active, arms straight. So you don't want to be lazy right here. You want to be in an active position through the shoulders, okay? Same thing like we talked about before. Knees go out, heels stay down as you go into the squat. See how my knees go out, heels stay flat, and my shoulders are in an active position, so they're pushing up through the bar the entire time, okay? Another good thing to try work on is depth. You can do that by squatting to a certain target if you're working on depth. But once you get deep enough, you shouldn't need that. I need that little prop. So I'm gonna show you from a side point of view. See how that bar goes in a straight line, up and down. Okay, this is the most advanced version of the squat. Takes a while to build up the flexibility needed, the coordination to do it. But that's the overhead squat. Next one I'm going to talk about is the shoulder press. So shoulder press you see here, it's a shoulder to overhead movement. So you start with the resistance placed across your shoulders and basically just pushing it up. Here you're just using your arms, okay? Neutral spine, you'll see that throughout. That's the most fundamentally important piece of lifting, is that neutral spine position. Heels stay flat, just like in the squat, because we're just using our arms here. And bar finishes over the shoulders, everything's stacked. Bar over the shoulders, shoulders over the hips, hips over the knees, knees over the toes, one straight line. And again, I keep coming back to the straight line idea, but that's really what we're doing here when we're lifting, is we're just lifting an object in a straight line and active shoulders. So I'll show you how to perform a push or a standard press or shoulder press. So this one's the easiest ones of the pressing movements. I don't need my whole body in this one because I'm just using my upper body. So here, it's a little bit different than front rack. Front rack, you're really exaggerated through the elbows. Here, you just want enough security on the bar. So now we're going for security. Wrap those hands around the bar, elbows slightly in front. You want that shoulders to be nice and active here. So what we do, get the head out of the way, press straight up, finish with that bar through, with the head through the bar. You see how the bar is over my shoulders, over the hips, over the knees, and over the ankles, okay? So any break in that line will look like this or like that. That's not a straight line. You want to avoid those two positions. You want to be one straight line, okay? That's the shoulder press. Okay, the next movement I'm going to talk about is the push press. This one, you just add one element to it. You add one knee bend, okay? And I think this one's better performed and explained, and you'll see why. This one and the next movement. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate the push press. And then I'll also explain the push jerk right along with it, because I think they're just work in harmony. One's just a little bit more complicated than the other. So with the push press, we're just using one knee bend that'll look like this. And then you pop it up. So you're basically using a hip extension, kind of a jumping movement to get that bar overhead. You're heaving it overhead, boom, and you're catching it in that straight line that we talked about before. So to demonstrate a couple reps. So here we're just using our legs once, okay? Finishing with that bar, everything stacked, okay? So that's a push press. The push jerk, you're just using your legs twice, to put it simply. So watch. Stand it up. Another push jerk. Bend the knees once, heave it up. You're catching it in a little squat, and then you stand up, okay? It's, so if you think about it in a real life practical term, if you're just trying to get something up into a, let's say a cupboard or a shelf, something like that, and it starts to come back to you, what do? You're gonna bend your knees to absorb that weight and catch it again. So basically what we're doing here, we're utilizing our legs twice. So we're using mostly our legs here instead of our arms to move this weight. So in a jerk, again, it's gonna look like this. See that? Stand it up. Sometimes I like to pause at the catch just to make sure I'm doing it right. Stand it up. So again, we're just adding an element of speed here. We're using our legs more than with just a standard push press, right? And then we have the push press. And then we have the push jerk. Okay, they all play off of each other. They're just sequentially just a little bit harder, but utilizing different muscle groups there. Hold on. Start sharing the screen again. Hey. So the next movement, so I covered the push jerk along with the push press. Again, they're very similar. You're just using more of your legs when you do the push jerk. I'm going to talk about the deadlift. So the deadlift, setup is the most important thing for this one. And I'll just go ahead and demonstrate it now. Here's a little slide if you want to look at these performance cues. But I'll explain it. I'll demonstrate it right now. Actually, with this picture right here, I also wanted to bring up that you can use different objects while doing these movements, but same points of performance goes. Those things never change. You just adjust where you grab the weight and where you set up. Okay, so comes back to me. Okay, so for the deadlift, the setup is the most important piece, like I talked about. So this is going to be where you set up. A squat, you're going to be a little bit wider. In the deadlift, you're always going to be a little bit closer. Think about it like your power position. So I'm going to jump. Wherever you land, that's your power position right there. Lock it in. That's your deadlift position. Okay. So to keep going with it, the setup starting down here at about mid chin, because that's about where you're going to be lifting a barbell off the ground. There's going to be weights on the side, so it's going to start about right here. Okay. So shoulders in front of the bar, PVCs touching the shins. That's the most important thing here. You might have guessed it, neutral spine. Okay, so let's talk about neutral spine in this position. So this is kind of the way I like to correct myself. This is how I taught myself to be in a neutral spine. If you can balance a PVC pipe and cross your back like that, that means you're in a neutral spine. Okay, so keep that. And that's going to be your setup. Okay, neutral spine, most important piece. Okay, and shoulders and hips rise at the same time. That's the deadlift. So we talked a lot. We spent most of the time there talking about the setup because the setup is the most important part. The movement, the actual moving of the weight is pretty simple. All you want to do is make sure your hips and shoulders rise simultaneously. So some common faults that you'll see there. Sometimes you'll see the booty pop up first and then the shoulders. That's a no-go. You also don't want the shoulders come off first and then the butt. That's also a no-go. You want the hips and the shoulders to rise simultaneously. Boom. Pretty simple, right? On the way down, it's just reverse everything what we did, except for hips go back first. And then bend your knees. So on the way back, it's more like you gotta think of it like hips and then knees. Hips go back first. You see that hips, 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 and then bend your knees. You're back into starting position right there, okay? So I'm gonna perform a couple deadlifts here. That way you guys can see what this should look like and see how the barbell is moving in a straight line. I go back to that straight line concept because if there's anything that I want you to take away from today's presentation is that we're lifting an object in a straight line. I was throwing this other piece of equipment, a kettlebell. It's a kettlebell that I talked about before, a great piece of equipment, one of my favorites. So for this one, we're gonna set up pretty much exactly the same way. Your spine is gonna be straight, neutral spine. Again, that's the most important thing right there, neutral spine. So now we're just demonstrating using a kettlebell. Pretty simple. Okay, so that's the deadlift. Next movement we're going to talk about is the sumo deadlift high pull. So this one is a more fast version of the deadlift. You can think of it that way. The setup is what makes it different than the traditional deadlift. You're going to be in a wider base, and that's why it gets its name, the sumo deadlift high pull. Let me see if I can put it back in the slideshow. So that's where you're going to be set up in a wide stance. That's where it gets its name, sumo stance, sumo deadlift, sumo stance. Your feet are wide, and your hands are going to be a bit closer on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate it. So for this one, so now we're adding another kind of speed element. So remember how we talked about before, how the shoulder press, you're just using your arms. So for this one, we're just, for the deadlift, we're just doing that first part, okay? Sumo deadlift high pull, we're adding a speed element here. So like we talked about before, feet wide, hands closer. What you're gonna do is not finish here, but you're gonna finish here, using that same kind of hip extension drive that we did with the push press. We're using our hips, kind of jump an object up there. Same thing here. Feet wide, hands narrow. As you come up and you get past the knees, you're gonna start to go into that heaving action. Boom. Finish with those elbows high, okay? So that's a sumo deadlift, high pull. Okay, demonstrate a couple more. See that line? See that bar travels in a straight line? Okay, so that's a sumo deadlift high pull. So we added that element of speed because now we're learning how to use our hips to kind of heave something up in the air safely. And that's how we're kind of incorporating that into these movements. We're using a hip extension, boom, to heave an object. So not only we're building a little bit of strength, but we're also building a little bit of power and explosiveness there. So that's a sumo deadlift high pull. Next one I'm talking about is a med ball squat clean. So this one, we're gonna switch up with the equipment and we're gonna talk about how to heave something, not only how to heave something up into the air, but catch it either in a squat or in a semi squat or in a full depth squat. You can kind of see here the different points of performance, but I think it does better to just explain it. So we're talking a lot about this heaving idea. Kind of demonstrated with the kettlebell, might be a little bit easier to see. Oops. So with the kettlebell setup, I want to talk about the deadlift type for a second, just because the heaving action is so important here. So the kettlebell, okay, and that kettlebell is moving in a straight line. See that? For the sumo deadlift high pull, legs go first and then arms come back first and then legs. So that's a sumo deadlift high pull. I just wanted to demonstrate it with a different piece of equipment. But now I want to use this. So for this one, the med ball clean, the setup, pretty important here. Laces in front, shoulders over the object. You see that? Neutral spine. Okay, neutral spine right here. Again, I'm gonna bring my PVC pipe back up because that really is the most important piece. Neutral spine. Okay, as you set up here. So basically what you're doing here is lay balls between your legs here and you're standing it up for a deadlift. So now we're combining a few different things here. So we're going from a deadlift to a high pull, to a catch, to a squat. Okay, so everything we just talked about, think of it like your final exam. It's right here. This is it. This is the cumulative exam. This puts everything together into one movement. So again, let's go over it again. Deadlift, high pull, catch, squat. And if you don't have that depth yet, it's just gonna look like this. See that? So laces stay in front. That's how you know you're doing it right. Let's do it again. As you come up, I'm demonstrating a little bit slower, but it is actually a little bit more of a faster movement. Because once you get past the knees, it's really all about heaving it, catching it. Okay, all in one. As you heaving it, I'm gonna catch a little bit of air time, and then flipping those elbows over to catch, boom, right there. So again, just to demonstrate, boom. Okay, boom. On this one, you wanna make sure that your legs go first, and then you really drive with that upper body to heave, and as you catch, you're sinking into that squat, okay? So this is a med ball clean. And then straight from a front view. See how those laces stay in front? So there, we're just learning how to heave an object, catch it, squat it, okay? That's the med ball clean. All right, just a few more things to talk about here. We have kind of gone over the most important pieces of just technique and form. And just to kind of review again, neutral spine, always neutral spine, and line, proper line of action. What I mean by that is the object's going to be moving in a straight line as possible. Okay, pretty much in all these movements. The next thing I'm going to talk about is a proper breathing. So there is this idea of, let me get back to it. Sorry. So there is this idea of bracing or intra-abdominal pressure. So it's just a way to lock in your core and just make sure everything's not only activated, but moving correctly through the spine and through the core. So the core involves not only your spine, but your abs, your hip flexors, everything from the chest to pretty much the top of your legs is considered your core. And so what we're doing here with the intra-abdominal bracing is we're activating all those muscles, including the muscles of the pelvic floor. So, and that's something that you really think about, as well as your diaphragm. Your diaphragm is going to be, you're going to learn pretty much how to activate your diaphragm through doing this. So go ahead and you can kind of see the image right here. So you're basically blowing yourself up like a balloon, making sure that you're putting pressure on all sides of that abdominal wall or that core, including to the spine, the front and to the sides, because you're literally activating everything. You can see kind of with this image on the left is you want to balloon yourself up, and you don't want to constrict. That's not the way you want to think about it. Like this image right here in the middle, you want to be more on the left. You want to be like a balloon. That's how you lock in that core before you do any lift. You want to make sure that you're doing that. So an easy way to kind of think of it, intra-abdominal pressure. And whenever you cough, laugh, anything like that, you're doing that automatically. Don't really think about it, but you're doing it subconsciously. We already know how to do that intuitively. As we get older, sometimes we lose activation of our diaphragm or our pelvic floor. You know, we get back issues. There's a lot going on in here, right? But if we learn how to do it correctly, we can save ourselves years of back pain or debilitating pain, hip replacement, whatever you can think of. This can help prevent that. So intra-abdominal breathing, you can think of it like a end of a cough. And I know coughing is kind of taboo right now, but cough, that end of the cough, everything's tight in here. Or a laugh, you laugh, you're laughing super hard. You gotta laugh like hysterically hard to actually feel these abdominals. Like sometimes when you laugh really hard, you know you had a good core workout. You can feel it afterward. But bracing, tightening up those abs, boom, bracing, and then blowing yourself up like a balloon. And you don't want the action to be in here. You want it to be through here. So brace and then balloon up like a balloon. So you want to think of it like you want to show off your belly, not your chest, but your belly. So before you go into any lift, for example, I want to bring back the PVC pipe. You'll see lifters do this kind of thing where they go, and then they'll brace right here. That's them bracing, and then they'll go, and then they'll go into the lift. So by doing that, they're activating everything through the front and through the back. So again, tight abs, like someone's about to punch you, tight abs, and then balloon. And then lift. Make sure you keep that tension while you go through the hardest part of the lift. And then once you come out, or whatever lift you're doing, you can go ahead and exhale. Okay, but you gotta make sure that you get past the hardest part of the lift before you exhale, because you wanna keep that pressure throughout, okay? So again, I'm gonna kind of exaggerate here, but See that? I'll do it again. Tight abs, tight butt. Always forget to squeeze your, never forget to squeeze your butt, because that's the other thing I forgot to mention. Squeezing your butt is important here. When you tighten your abs, squeeze your butt, balloon. Okay. You can also do this lying down, which kind of transitions to the next part, actually. You can also do this lying down and learn how to activate those deep abdominal muscles by lying down. So here, you want to lay down so that your spine is neutral. Okay, here you want to kind of feel the softness in your belly. There's not much going on right now. Okay, but if you learn to squeeze those abs and then balloon up, you can kind of see everything's kind of starting to pop out back here. I can even feel my lower back start to kind of dig into the ground. My obliques right here, or my love handles are just kind of ballooning out. Okay, that's the kind of tension you want to feel. Okay, relax. Now, soft belly, there's no action going on. This is us naturally, okay? Okay, so now we're gonna activate that again. Okay, tight abs, and then balloon. You might not see much movement, but you really wanna think of it like you're bringing air through and into your belly, not your chest, but your belly, okay? Your chest isn't necessarily considered part of your core, but your abs are. So you want your belly to feel this whole tension. Okay, relax. Soft belly again. I'm gonna do it one more time. So abs tight, and then balloon. Boom, everything's activated to there. You might not be able to tell, but there is, everything in here is filled up like a balloon right now, and it's making it a little bit difficult for me to speak, but that's the kind of tension you want. Relax. Okay, so you're also trying to close this gap between the floor and your lower back, because there should be a natural arch to it. But once you learn that intra-abdominal pressure, you find that it expands and it kind of activates those lower back muscles. And again, butt tight. Okay, so that's a little bit about intra-abdominal breathing. Very important. Not only for safety reasons, but just for longevity too. It does us a whole lot of good, and it saves us years off our life when we learn how to do it correctly. So now I'm going to talk about some stretches that we can do and warm-ups. Okay. Proper warm-up and stretching, I think is, you probably get sick of me saying this, but this is really one of the most important things, is being flexible in order to decrease your chance of injury, okay? Flexibility is key. And by being flexible, that doesn't just mean being able to touch your toes. Yeah, that's one way of measuring flexibility, but there's all sorts of ways to measure flexibility. Being able to do an overhead squat, being able to do a full depth squat, being able to do press a barbell overhead and keeping it in a straight line, all that stuff requires flexibility. So for what I always recommend for warm-up exercises, you want to think of it like warm-up through motion, through movement. Okay, avoid the standing still type of stretches where you're just, bending over, touching your toes. You really want to integrate more movement type exercises through when you're trying to warm up prior to an exercise routine. So things like a downward upward dog movement, cat cows, bird dogs, a plank to activate your core, Supermans and glute bridges. Those are my go-tos, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate that right now. So there's a little go-to routine that I like to do before I do any type of resistance training. I'll start with these kind of yoga push-ups to get my spine in a nice position. So downward dog into an upward dog. So you can do this a couple ways. Okay, that's the upward dog. Downward dog. Really simple. Get your nice and warmed up. Get your spine moving. It also warms up your legs and your shoulders. Okay, and then that's the upward downward dog, also known as yoga push-ups, or you can do, there's also this one that is one of my go-tos. They're called bird dogs. So you are going opposite arm, opposite leg on these. Ball back a little bit. So here we're just activating those individual muscles that surround the spine. We have little tiny muscles that protect our spine all the way down. And this is a great one to activate those little erector spiny muscles, bird dogs. You can also try the more advanced version, which would be doing same arm, same leg. Oh, or without losing your balance. This one's a little bit tougher. So this one requires a little bit more stability, but bird dogs, okay? And then there's a plank. Different types of planks, but the most basic one is the elbow plank. This one's one of my go-tos because not only does it force you to activate your core, it also works your core. It also makes your core more durable. This is good for you for so many things. Getting butt tight, everything should be straight. I like to do it anywhere between 2 to 4 minutes, just depending how I'm feeling that day. The goal is to be able to hold that plank for 3 to 5 minutes. That's when you know you got a good, healthy core. And one more I want to talk about right here is a Superman. This one's another good one to not only to activate your butt, but again, those spine muscles. And I know I talked a lot about the spine today, so that really is the main point of focus when we're talking about lifting, is you want to protect the spine. And then that, yeah. Now I'm going to talk about, those are some movements that I like to do before an exercise routine, before I start warming up for the actual movement. So after I get through that little sequence, I might start warming up with an empty bar, start doing some squats, pretend this is a heavier bar, okay? And then I'll start warming up the movement, or if it's a shoulder press, I'll start doing with an empty bar, and then I'll start to add weight. So there's the things I do before I lift, and then there's so you can think of it like warming up, a pre-warm up and a warm up, and then you get into the lift. Hey, last thing I'm talking about is some stretches, some static stretches that you can do, not only to increase flexibility, but to increase longevity of the muscles. So let's talk with a simple heel sit. Okay, this one's good for you for so many reasons. We lose the ability, to sit down, sit cross-legged, to sit on our heels, do stuff like this. It gets harder as we get older. As little kids, we can do this no problem. We can hit a full depth squat. We can do so many things. We could do this when we're kids, but just as we get older, we start sitting more, life gets in the way. It's something that we kind of lose along the way. But it is so important to maintain flexibility through these different ways. So there's the heel sit. This one's good not only for the tops of the feet and the ankles, but the thighs, okay? And you can kind of work with the different ranges of motion, increase that stretch, okay? So that's a heel sit. That's one of my go-tos. Heel sit into a groin stretch. This one's also one of my favorites because gets my groin nice and stretched out here. You can also add weights. Pretend I had 2 weights, right? You can put them right down on the knees. That way it deepens the stretch and you get a little bit more out of it. But if you don't have anything with you, this is totally fine. You get enough of a stretch here. You can bring the feet in closer for a deeper stretch. You can use the elbows to push the knees down to get a stretch there. So it's a simple groin stretch. I think that one's called the cobbler pose. Let's see. So those are a couple stretches right there. Let's see what else I had. Oh, okay. The last couple stretches I'll talk about is the pigeon stretch. This one's my favorite stretch, definitely my favorite by far. This one stretches out the back or the outside back part of your leg, and you'll perform it by just putting one leg in front, like that, cross one leg over, and then that back knee is down. You can either keep it here, or you can deepen the stretch by going down to your elbows. This is called a pigeon stretch, and you should feel it on the back part of the butt, right outside that glute right here. Nice stretch. It also stretches your thighs, outside part of your thighs too. So just to kind of even it out, bring it around to the other side. So again, this is good enough. Stay here. You don't have to, you never want to push through pain when it comes to stretching. You want to embrace the stretch, the lengthening, but it shouldn't be painful, if that makes sense. You want it just enough so where you feel the stretch, but it's not painful. So here or here for the pigeon stretch. Okay, also my favorite stretch in the world. Okay, we have done mostly just leg movements, so I do want to talk about one shoulder, or after this one actually, sorry. The next one I'm talking about is a couch stretch. This one you can do pretty much anywhere. You just need a corner. This is why they call it a couch stretch. So the way you set up for it, my back leg is up against the wall, whatever you choose, or you can do this on the couch. That's why they call it the couch stretch. But this one stretches the front part of your groin, your hip flexors right here, and you want to squeeze your butt. The goal here is to be able to get your leg, your back leg, all the way up against the wall, as well as your shoulders and your back and the back of your head. I don't have the flexibility myself, but it's something that I strive for. Pretend I had a wall behind me. Pretend this is my wall. I'm gonna teach you, look, I'm gonna show you from a side point of view. Pretend this wall is a wall. Okay, so there's a wall behind me. Your back leg is up against the wall. Squeezing your butt here. You should get a stretch to that hip flexor right here, okay? The goal is to be able to get all the way back to where this back leg is up against the wall, as well as your entire back. Okay, that's the couch stretch. One more. We did a lot of leg and core work and stretches, but there's also the needle through child's pose, which I really like because it stretches out the shoulders in a good way. So bring yourselves in neutral position, arm through, and lay yourself down, boom, for a nice stretch through the shoulder here. And if you get a nice little back pop, that's extra credit. Okay, so again, needle through, lay yourself down for a nice little shoulder stretch. One of my favorite stretches here too. You always want to breathe through these. Don't hold your breath. You want to make sure you breathe. Make those breaths nice and deep, nice and long, okay? And just relax. Relax through the stretch. I know it seems counterintuitive because I honestly hate stretching, but I've had to learn to embrace it and to relax through them. Okay, the last one is simple child's pose. This one's also one of my favorites because you get a nice little shoulder stretch, as well as it stretches your back nice and good. And if you're ever feeling tightness or anything like that to the lower back, find the floor, get on your knees and sit back into the child's pose. So those are all stretches that I do after a lifting routine. Again, there's so many different ways to increase flexibility. But with no further ado, that pretty much finishes up my presentation. Where am I at time? 12:53. If anyone wants to reach out or have any questions, I'll leave my email address in the chat. And I will okay, well, if anyone wants to reach out to me, we do offer personal training through employee wellness, in person and virtually. So, and we also, so if you want to learn any of this more in depth, you can go ahead and reach out to me, or you can also schedule a personal training session directly through our website. We have a staff of 4 personal trainers right now under me, and we can certainly make that happen. And our website is wellness.usu.edu. And you can go to services and then do personal training to schedule that. Like I said too, we do offer virtual sessions as well. But with no further ado, I don't really know how to close out these presentations, but I was happy to be here today. I hope that some of you guys got some takeaway from this. Again, healthy spine is a happy spine, happy life, okay? I know we talk about happy wife, happy life. That's also true. Not taken away from that, but happy spine, happy life, okay? Good work, guys. We'll catch you guys either Thursday or in another presentation this week.